Ladies and gentlemen, just before we get into this episode of the Fitzness Podcast, just a quick reminder that we are also on Spotify and Anchor. So if you want to listen to this episode uninterrupted while you're in a car journey or you're trying to do something around the house, then please do head over to both of those pages and check us out there. On with the episode.
If you're chasing music, chase music. Try not to chase one part of music. So keep your interests open. Learn a bit about the music business. If you're songwriting, try and, in a very simple way, GarageBand or whatever, like try and learn how to record yourself. I think becoming as multi-skilled as possible is going to go a really long way for you, especially if you're younger. And then as you grow up, you'll kind of fall into what you love the most in music. But just, kind of try and keep your options open. I would have never said when I was like 10 years ago, I'm going to be in a country band in Nashville, but I kept my mind open to it. I kind of chased the things that I loved, and then this is just where I've ended up. So open mind and enjoy it.
Ladies and gentlemen, just before we get into this episode of the Fitzness Podcast, just a quick word on our sponsors for today's episode, Rock Supplements. Now, Rock Supplements have been around for a little bit now, and I've been very, very impressed with the stuff that they're doing in Gibraltar, delivering supplements to people who maybe want specific companies. So definitely, if you're maybe looking at the likes of Redcorn or Ghost Supplements, definitely go and check them out in the description box below if you are based in Gibraltar, and use the code FITZ10 for not only 10% off your order, but some support as well for the podcast and to help us grow and get better guests on the podcast. Just before we get into this episode, guys, just a quick disclaimer that I was having a little bit of an issue with my microphone whilst we were recording this episode with Simon. Although his recording is perfectly fine, the audio is perfect, I was having a little bit of an issue with the microphone, so my audio is a little bit echoey. I tried my absolute best during the edit to make sure that I tried to reduce it as much as possible, and actually turned out okay considering the circumstance when I compared it to the first recording. So I'm glad that at least it's the audio is bearable, but just wanted to let you guys know in advance. It's not as bad as you probably think it is, but hopefully, fingers crossed, it doesn't impair what an amazing chat this was with Simon Dumas. On with the episode. Welcome back, ladies and gents, to another episode of the Fitzness Podcast. This is episode number 44. And you may be wondering why, James, you've got a musician on when you call the Fitzness Podcast. Well, to be honest with you, I just wanted to get on as many people with the most amazing thoughts and stories as possible. And unfortunately, none were available. So I went with Simon today. I'm only joking. I'm only joking, of course, ladies and gents. Obviously, no, like being serious now, I do obviously feel that Simon fits that bill that I've just mentioned. So I definitely wanted to have him on. Obviously, a quarter of King Calaway, which is awesome, and obviously being a fellow Gibraltarian, it's unbelievable to speak to people who are living the dream and making this little Gibraltar talk absolute nonsense. Simon, welcome, mate.
Thank you. I'm excited.
What introduction?
That was a great introduction. That was smashed it.
That was my best one by far.
Absolutely smashed it.
But no, ladies and gents, obviously I've given Simon a very brief introduction there, and obviously Simon thinks that we're going straight onto his journey, but this is a little surprise curveball.
Okay.
Icebreaker question every single session.
Okay.
And I'm quite this one's been done before, but I'm curious to see how musicians it changes with musicians. Before you go on stage,
yes,
do you have any weird superstitions? If you don't, I'm going to ask another one. So think nice and hard, mate, because you see all these footballers, mate, stepping onto the pitch with their left foot. They're taping one tape on one finger and the other joining the finger. Mate, have you got any weird and wacky superstitions for us?
Nothing weird and wacky. I mean, as a band, we'll typically do a shot of whiskey. One of those pa arriba, pa abajo. I kind of started leading that very early on, and then
the Gibraltarians will know exactly what that is.
Exactly.
By the way,
Yeah.
Whoever doesn't, it's basically something that we do in Gibraltar, which is a little routine where we go up. Can't translate it back into English.
Up, down, into the middle,
and in. There we go.
And in. Right before you take a shot. So
exactly, you're not doing it with your Robin squash. You're not doing it with your Robinson squash. You're doing it with some alcoholic beverage.
Exactly. So we do a shot of whiskey, and then we usually just say a prayer. Pray for everyone there. Pray for us that nothing goes crazily wrong, and then that's pretty much it. I mean, I suppose it's probably some nervous like things that we do on stage. It's a bit like sports, I guess. You're kind of going out on the pitch or whatever. So, but those are the two that we definitely do every show. So
yeah. I'll accept the whiskey one, mate. I'll accept the whiskey. That's weird and wacky. I'll expect that. I wasn't expecting that also.
There you go.
That's a great start. Great start. So now on to Simon's story. Obviously, I'm very aware of it. Simon's a long family friend of myself. Believe it or not, his brother Guy was one of my first cricket coaches. I know he's watching. So yeah, I had to throw that in there because he would definitely message me saying, "Why didn't you mention that?" All those times on the nets. All those times on the nets, and you didn't even mention me on your podcast. What are you doing? So no, Guy, that was for you, mate. So can you tell us about your story, obviously from the very beginning, and then we can progress up until today.
Yeah, from the beginning, like back in my cricket playing days, or just music.
I didn't throw that one in there. That one in there.
There was a time in my life when I remember being like 14 or 15, and I was like, am I going to be a professional cricket player, or am I going to choose to be a musician? And literally, it's really funny to think that as a child, you just like, those feel like really obvious, tangible options. You're like, these are my two passions, so now I just need to pick one. But yeah, I loved cricket. I still love cricket. I'm really bad at it now, but the music kind of grew in Gibraltar. I was in a band with my brothers, as you know, Philip and Guy, and we did loads of gigging in Gib. At the same time, I was in the Santos Productions choir, so I was kind of learning what it was to sing in a big choir and learn harmonies and just like general musicality, and then also just by doing music for like my GCSEs and my A-levels. So I was always doing music, and I think that it served me quite well to be studying music in school and then having the choir experience, which is just different, and you're like learning harmonies and stuff. And then also just being in a band is really difficult. So being in a band, playing gigs, setting up a PA system, trying to sell merch, I feel like I covered a lot of bases without even realizing I was learning a lot about the music industry and how it works. But yeah, I went to college, I went to Manchester to university, studied music, and essentially the band with Philip and Guy, This Side Up and Frontiers at the time, it felt like it was coming to a natural kind of end. And that was when I was introduced to some people here in Nashville. So here I am, coming up to 5 years later in Nashville.
It's a great story, because obviously I'm very grateful to have had sort of Gibraltarians on who have really, really progressed and succeeded, like TJ DeBar, obviously playing for Wigan at the moment.
Smashing it.
And it was awesome because even being at uni, you kind of feel that little Gibraltar mantra always follows you, and you kind of want to get out that mold and show that obviously people from Gibraltar can make it, which is obviously, it's growing and growing all the time. And by the way, just a little side note, by the way, I'm terrible with music. So
that's okay.
And anyone, you're going to have to teach me as well some of these like sort of harmonies. I'm not sure. So like just a little, so in case you think that I know what that means. I'm all about reflection and being honest. So if I ever
that's stop you and so say, funny,
Simon, what
I don't know what's going on. That's okay.
Yeah, you get some definitions out of me. So I'm going to start there because obviously we mentioned TJ. What was it like having that dream of we'll stick with the music, no disrespect to Simon's professional cricketing career. We'll stick with the music because obviously that's where at the moment life has taken him. Now, next year he might be playing in the 100 or playing it.
Who knows?
We never know. But what was it like having those aspirations of being a musician? Because TJ probably didn't have anyone to look up to in terms of that respect. And I suppose it's a little bit of a similar thing with yourself. So how did you keep yourself motivated to be like, I need to go away? Yes, I understand. But what motivated you? Because obviously we're quite a tight-knit group, Gibraltar, as people and as citizens there. So how did you stay motivated?
Yeah, I think like performing was the biggest motivation. Like I love the feeling of stepping on stage. I love the feeling of people singing back songs that we've written, and then just allowing myself to be like constantly motivated and inspired by like going to concerts or like my peers, especially. So in my 4th year of uni, I did an exchange program where I went to LA to study music for 4 months, and quite late in the game at that point, like 4 years into uni, was where I was made very aware, like, whoa, like people do this for a living, and it's not just about performing. Like you can be a songwriter, you can be a producer, you can be a music teacher, you can do music business. And suddenly it was like the whole, like in Gibraltar, it always felt like, okay, I either have to be like super famous or I can't do music and live in Gibraltar. And now I'm learning, like, it's every day looks different for me. One day I'm writing a song, one day I'm producing a demo, one day I'm packing on my suitcase to go on tour with King Calaway and going into the studio to record songs. And I just kind of love being in the whole just like ecosystem of Nashville music. So yeah, I feel like my motivations were just, this is what I'm best at, honestly. I mean, not that I'm amazing, but I know that this is what I'm best at. I'm best at music and not at anything else. Like, but in the back of my head, a lot of the times I'm like, well, I could always go back. Like if things go really bad, or if I need to. Thankfully, like, I think you're right, Gibraltar is super close knit, and more than anything, it's extremely supportive. So I feel like if I ever had to, I could like turn around and go back.
He's done himself a disservice there. Music's absolutely class. Whack up Alexa in the background. Oh, absolutely love it. I still play back this side up. Some of them. Oh, it's fantastic.
Me too.
Back those days. That was one of the other questions. Have you seen, like, on they do on YouTube, and they're like, do you listen to your own music? And some people, they confidently say yes. I would as well. If I produce something like that.
I don't. I mean, I don't. I listen to it loads until it's released, and then as soon as it's released, I just can't listen to it.
One of your daily routines, 5 hours of playing King Calaway back
playing King Calaway? No, trust me, that's not what it looks like.
But I suppose you have to be proud of yourself. Like, going a bit off topic, you have to be proud of yourself when you create such an amazing thing like a song. Where I get it, and obviously to a very, very small scale in comparison. But when I make one of these episodes, episode 44 now, I get proud of myself every single time, because it's 45 minutes or an hour to record or whatever it takes. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I'm fortunate, like today, we've not got a time limit, so we can just ramble on. But then you have to edit it back, and then you have to create all the artworks for it and do the stuff beforehand. You get proud of yourself. Do you have to kind of, again, it comes back to like staying humble in a certain way, but are you proud of yourself when you've created a track, no matter how well it does?
Yeah, I feel like like you say, like creating anything is exciting. Even just like making the bed in the morning is like, so
I never used to do that. But this is not for the setup, ladies and gents. This is proper. Like, I've started doing this every morning.
So like for me, more than like being super proud of what I'm achieving, it's more like excited that I can create. So like sometimes I'll do a demo, and like a demo of a song that I've written, and I'm like recording it here in my home studio, and then I do the next one, and I can sort of get there a bit quicker, and I can tell that it's sounding a bit better. And so what I get is like this excitement that the more I'm doing it, the better it's getting. But yeah, I mean, it's nice to look back at the end of the week and be like, oh, great, I wrote 3 or 4 songs this week, or that kind of thing. It's, super exciting.
How do you approach songwriting then, as in general? Is it a forceful thing, or is it all about feel? Because in sports, relating it back to sports, because obviously that's the industry I'm in.
Yeah.
Everyone talks nowadays about feel. I met with one of my best mates, Alex Ross's shirt's actually on the wall there, believe it or not.
Nice.
And he was saying how Fitzy, like, I've started now, like, going off feel a lot. Like, nothing is about how well I think the game's going to go. It's all about feel in the moment. And then I'm like, that could be portrayed a little bit to songwriting, because if you're feeling a certain, again, I can use my musical knowledge, a certain, a certain melody coming along, or a certain idea, a certain type of lyrics. So Sam was impressed there. That I knew.
Smashed it, man. Look at all your big words.
Is it all about feel for musicians as well, do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I think so. When I'm songwriting, you have to, like, and it sounds really cliche, and it sounds really like airy-fairy, but truly, if you're not feeling it, there's no point trying to force an agenda. And the cool thing is, in Nashville, like, a lot of the things that happen is co-writes. So I write with people. So maybe it's me and two other people in a room writing a song. And what's really cool there is, like, someone told me once, he's like, we don't just want to write a song, we want to write a chorus where you literally can't help but stand up when you're hearing the chorus, because you're like, we got it, like, we smashed it, that's the perfect line, or that's the perfect melody. And that's cool when you're basing it off feeling. At the same time, I think it's really important that you don't only chase feelings. Sorry to contradict myself, but the thing is that the feelings are going to fade. And for example, if you are a skydiver, the first time you skydive, it's going to feel amazing. But if you start doing 10 skydives a week, you're not going to have that same feeling every time. And so you have to trust that your instincts now are dictating, like, how good something is once you've done it a lot of times.
Well, I don't know about skydiving. I think I'll be peeing myself if I was going skydiving.
Yeah, I just spoke about skydiving as if I do that all the time. I've never been once. Haven't even thought about it.
It's a second career, skydiving.
Second career, third career, bro, after cricket.
After cricket. And I'm intrigued about how you mentioned if it's not working, not in a way like not putting out energy in something that it's really not feeling it. But then how do you then portray something like hard work when that comes into the equation? Because you don't want to force it, but I suppose every song has that initial feel, whether the song gets released or whether it doesn't get released. Do you have, at what stage for you, is there a time then where you go, like, it's not working. Like, it's not, because you can put some extra hours in and say this potentially could work, but it's,
yeah. I mean,
not every song is probably going to, and songwriting's not a perfectly scripted, pun the pun, perfectly scripted sort of process, I suppose. You know, you're going to have songs which maybe don't feel great at first, then you come back to them in a month's time and you get another idea and it's there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're completely right there. Like, I try not to close the door on a lot of things. Even sometimes I like start writing and just pick up the guitar and start coming up with something, and I'm like, yeah, this is so bad, or like it feels so cringy and so obvious. But I'll record it on my voice memos, and then maybe in a month, if I'm feeling super dry creatively and I don't know what to do, I'll listen back and hear it in a different light. So you're like, oh, maybe this is workable. But I think chasing down songs and finishing them purely because out of respect for the song, whether it's going to be a really bad song or not, is probably the best way to do it, because you can always learn anything from writing a song, and you can learn more about what you don't like. And it's also just like, it's a bit like exercise. Like, the more you songwrite, the more you work that muscle, the stronger you'll be at it. And so I think that's super important. And then I actually saw like an Ed Sheeran thing once where he was like, it's really important that you write even when you think it's bad, and don't criticize the writing, because you kind of need to get out all the crap before the good stuff comes. So
yeah, so then that's why I'm interested, because then I suppose, could you say that there's no sort of definitive line where you say this is a no-go, or, you know, I suppose, because like you said, has there ever been a song for you where it's been like, at first it's like, I'll just leave it for now, and you've come back and like, oh, well, you know, this could actually be something?
Or
like maybe close to, or like
yeah,
maybe like,
yeah. I mean, it's weird. Like, I try and finish them. And then maybe when it comes to recording them, I tweak them as I'm recording. But yeah, no, I suppose sometimes I try and finish them. I'm trying to think of an example, but I don't really have one. I don't really have one of that.
He's gone across everything that he just mentioned about leaving it, then coming back and listening to it again. But no, it's awesome, because then obviously, like I said, it might happen in the future. So then obviously when you have that clear perspective that you can be like, right, this ain't working right now, and you can push on. But then how about switching off then from music, or is it always music for you? Can you ever switch off as a songwriter? That's something that I've just sort of come to my mind.
I do. I sit there and play FIFA. I go for a walk. I go to the gym, and it's very hard to not be very self-critical. So like, I really struggle with when I hear a good song, I'm like, oh, that feels so obvious. Like, how did I not come up with that? Or like, especially when it's someone who's like even a peer, no? And you're like, oh, I'm super proud of you and I'm really happy for you, but I'm really annoyed that I didn't write that. Yeah. So in that regard, you're kind of like always turned on and like maybe even listening to songs with an analytical mind. You're like, oh, that's cool. Why is that cool? But at the same time, inspiration, at least for me, like I have to be kind of in it. If I spent a day songwriting and I'm just kind of talking about music and doing things, like inspiration will hit me at random times. If I'm not, it won't. And I think that that's really important. Like sometimes people think like, oh, you're just going to be walking over down the street or getting the bus and randomly this perfect song is going to come to your head and Mother Inspiration is going to send you. But I think she'll serve you best if you are like trying. Like if you sit at the piano and you try and play something, that's when it's going to hit you. Having said that, yeah, there has been 1 or 2 nights where I've literally haven't been able to sleep and I'm like, I've just got this melody, and I've literally come to my music room and recorded it, and then in the morning been like, amazing, let's chase this down, you know what I mean? So that's always exciting.
Are those some of the times that people don't see when a track gets released or an album gets released, is that they see the finished product and they potentially expect a nice clear path as to how that song came about, and then you're just like 2 or 3 of them, you're like, I can't believe that
we finally
came from staying up all night and doing it.
Yeah, I think like when someone puts out an album, especially, well, at least for King Calaway, it's like we put out a 4-song EP last year. We recorded 20 songs and we chose 20 songs from 100 that we had written. So at that point, you're like really trying to refine what's going to be released. And then even so, you bring the song to the studio and with the producer, you're like, oh, this second line in the second verse, just the syllables don't feel right. Like, let's tweak this, or, you know, that then takes a month of recording. And so, yeah, I have a lot of respect for just the whole album making process, because you go through a lot of self-doubt, a lot of pride, a lot of excitement, a lot of nerves, and then it's just out. And all the kind of consumer and the listener sees as a finished product that usually just looks really beautiful and sounds really beautiful, but it's a really long process to get there.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was Lewis Sheeran. Nice one, James.
Nice one.
Merged 2 there. I don't know if it was Lewis Capaldi or Ed Sheeran who kind of mentioned this, said that they love touring, but they freaking hate making an album because it's just like the longest process. I can imagine. I would get probably down in that respect. Do you get down when potentially you think a certain song should make that 20 list, but it doesn't?
Yeah, obviously, especially if I've written it, because at least I get very attached to the songs I've written.
I was going to say, because like you mentioned, you, to a certain extent, you get that meaning behind the song or the chorus, like you mentioned at the start. But then, so you kind of feel attached with it when it doesn't. You're like, oh, all right then. Like,
yeah, it's just going to sit in Dropbox probably forever, yeah. And so definitely get attached. At the same time, I'm in a band and I respect that all of us are having those little journeys as songwriters. And so at the end of the day, you're just trying to find songs that fit a certain sound. So maybe there's like 1 or 2 songs which feel really obvious. Okay, these are great songs, we want to record them. And then the rest of the album is like molding to that. Because if not, you can have great songs that just don't sound the same and it just becomes a big mess. But that doesn't mean the song isn't good. It just means that you're trying to keep everything cohesive, basically.
Yeah. And then once that album's released, then I'm going to ask you the same question in a different sense. How hard on yourself are you in terms of analytics? I was that when I first released a podcast, obviously I was very, very aware. I was probably a bit naive in the fact that, this episode is with this person. You know, I'm not going to mention the episode out of respect. In case
this one, no, it's going to have a million views. This
yeah. Obviously, I think in respect, as the amount of episodes have gone on, like I said, respect to that person, I was probably like, okay, I'm going to invest in this episode, and then this episode is what's going to take the podcast to the next level. And it actually wasn't the case. And the ones that I've actually enjoyed filming the most, which is obviously going to be this one as well, because we're only like half an hour in almost, and it's amazing so far. They actually end up being the best episodes. Is it a case that when you release it, how sort of critical of yourself are you? You're like, this one hasn't had that many listens.
Yeah.
You know, is it? Why isn't it? Was it a case of just letting it out there, seeing how it does, and just being with it?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because it's really tough, because you like have these dreams that when you're recording it, at least when I've been in the studio with King Calaway, I literally feel like, oh my gosh, this is so special, so magical that the whole world is going to hear it. And you suddenly release it, and like you say, like I've got the Spotify for artists, so I can, or Apple Music artists, and I can literally see in real time how many listeners we have, how many times a song I wrote has streamed, and I do get disheartened. But at the same time, the industry is so different now. Like, people don't really listen to albums, they listen to playlists. Like one of the songs on our first album, we didn't even promote it, we didn't talk about it on Instagram, we didn't talk about it on social media. It was the 8th track on a 12-song album, and we suddenly saw that it had loads of streams, and we were just like, why? And it ended up being that it had been playlisted by Spotify in a mellow morning playlist. And so in like Germany and in the UK, again, we're like a Nashville American-based band, but suddenly in that world, it was literally just getting like millions of streams, and we hadn't done anything to do that. And so a lot of it is just kind of hoping that you strike gold and you get playlisted and stuff like that. And then playing live, you have an opportunity to bring these songs, and I think that's where people get the best connection with the artist. They're like, oh my gosh, like I heard this song, and the first time I heard it was live in this room, and it was so emotional, and now I want to go back and listen to it. So you have to put in the work to go out on the road and showcase your songs so that people go and find them. And then it's a bit like, I mean, everything now is numbers. Like, I don't know, like in the Premier League the other day, they were like, Leicester had the lowest expected goals ever recorded. And I'm like, well, yes, but like, it just feels like we're just judging everyone by numbers now.
And next week they win 4-0, and where's those numbers?
Exactly. And it's like, the numbers just feel really arbitrary, and they don't like mean anything. It's like, okay, say I got, look at Instagram, you get 100 likes on something, and you're like, oh man, I wish I had 200, but then you have 200 and you wish you had 300, and that's never going to end. So trying not to be too hard on yourself, and knowing that you'd put in good work, and kind of letting it hopefully do its thing. Yeah,
because this episode hasn't released yet, but I did one with Olympian Daniel Whiffen. So he's an Irish swimmer who's studying here at Loughborough, which was another unbelievable chat. I think that's going to be episode 47, I think, off the top of my head.
Cool.
And he mentioned how kind of never gets satisfied. So then once he gets to a certain level and he surpasses that, he can never be disappointed. Or if he doesn't reach it, he can never be disappointed. What for you makes, or like, is a good song? Like, again, is it reaching a certain number? Or is it like the intrinsic sort of feeling? Anyone who doesn't realize what intrinsic is, it's like from within, the feeling that you have sort of deep down.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of different wins that you can get in the songwriting world. Like
you mentioned on the playlist there, that's probably huge, because then there's people who maybe haven't heard of King Calaway, no disrespect.
Yeah, no. I mean,
and then they go on to this and like, who the hell is this band? They're amazing. And then they listen to another song, and another song, that song gets streamed, and they share that, and then that other people listen to it.
And then, it just catches on. No, I think, like, I definitely have goals that are, like, you know, like, I mean, my absolute dream is, like, you know, have a gold record of a song that I co-wrote or that I'm on, and then it's
which
like...
will happen.
Well, I mean, who knows? Confidence. I'm praying for it, but even if it doesn't, that's okay. With the band, it's like, we would love to, like, smash it and be top 10 on radio, like country radio and stuff like that. But I think what you were saying, like, intrinsically, sometimes, I mean, just writing, like, I've written with people here, and I don't usually Google who they are before I go to the write, because I don't want to be, like, nervous. And then I'll be, like, driving home, and I'll just check out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's, like, Keith Urban's guitar player, or like this person wrote that number one song and this person wrote that number one. And so those things are just like really cool stories and experiences that I get to take with me, which I can't like quantify and put as like, oh, look, this happened. But yeah, songwriting is weird.
How do you deal then when they do go well and you do get a bit of success? And again, we mentioned this just before we came not on air, before we recorded, and you did an interview on Gibraltar local news, GBC, with James Nish, I think it was. Have I got the right?
Oh, Michael Beltran.
Potentially, one of those. And he asked you, how do you stay humble when you get that success? And I'm gonna steal that same question. I'll be honest.
Okay, it's really funny because for me, it's like I like compared to people around me, like there's been like nothing in terms of success. So like for me, that's like really obvious. I'm like, I haven't been that successful. Like I've just like
walking down Main Street and you're just like, guys, no photos. No,
but I mean, on the contrary, I'm like super. I know that I'm a nobody, and I'm quite happy that that's the case. So like we're all just doing really cool things.
Yeah.
In our own fields of life. I'm no more successful than a teacher who's got their class to get all A's in Bayside. You know what I mean? Like that for me is as successful in their job as anything else. So, but in terms of staying grounded, which I think is super important, is well, like I'm getting married, pop the question, but having someone in your life.
I told you off recording many congrats.
Thank you. Having someone in your life who you're just very real with, and you can like just, I don't know, do real life things. Like nothing humbles you more than picking up, when your dog does a doo-doo, and having to take out the big trash can, and like, you know what I mean? Just like doing life things, and that's like super fun. And with King Calaway, we don't travel very glamorously. We go on the plane, we're the back row, we get in a van and we slum it. We do what we have to do because we just want to be playing shows. Yeah. And at the end of the day, that's like also really beautiful. That's a really cool part of the story. But yeah.
Because
I remember I did want to say this because you said, what do you do when it's going well before?
Yeah.
And I think going back to the dog thing, we reward dogs when they get something right. And I think that while we're trying to stay humble and grounded, we often in this day and age like beat ourselves up because it's like, oh, I haven't actually achieved anything. Well, I had a song that I co-wrote that came out by a Christian artist that I've looked up to my whole life, and Izzy, my fiance, and we actively were like, okay, the day it comes out, we're gonna go and have a celebratory dinner, because it's like we need to start celebrating, even though it's, I haven't suddenly like hit the jackpot. It's like it's not this like crazy thing where I'm buying mansions, but it's a small win. And if you don't give yourself those wins, like how else are you going to be motivated sometimes? So yeah.
Are you like, again, I was going to ask another question, or I was going to mention another point there, and I mentioned this one just before I forget it. Is it tough sometimes not to be motivated by the glam of the music industry when you do get some success in terms of maybe like financial rewards? I know you personally, and I don't think you would be, but I suppose it's quite tough potentially to maybe sort of not fall under that trap at some point. No, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, the most honest, candid answer I can give is, if I was doing it for the music, I wouldn't be doing it. Sorry, if I was doing it for the money, I wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
Because, that's, I mean, it's going to take a lot to kind of get to that level. And I think that it's such a testament to like people who are able to persevere. And then also there's a lot of luck. There's a lot of things that go into it, and just talent and things. But right now I'm just like on this journey, and I don't know, like the glam. Yeah. Like it's fun. Like it's fun when King Calaway, we've gone to like red carpet events, and you make an effort and you get dressed up and do cool things like that. But I'm also like a very introverted person, and I quite like just chilling at home and not dressing up like crazy. Yeah. So, does that answer? I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, definitely. Not definitely, because I this next point actually leads on to what I was going to say anyway, which was I'm a huge boxing fan, and I was watching. I think it might have been when he's WBC champ now, and he Tyson Fury, and he mentioned that it was one of his documentaries I did, I think it was on Channel 4 or something like that, and he kind of mentioned how he absolutely loves going back to Morecambe in Manchester and doing the bin run or doing the school run.
That's so funny,
with his kids. And I suppose it's regardless of sort of maybe what level you get to, I suppose there's nothing, maybe not routine for him, because obviously he's away a lot in training camps, and maybe you're away touring a lot. But I suppose it gives you a bit of a sense of that's like your happy place, because that's one thing which has stuck with me now, and where I kind of revert to, dealing with some stuff mentally and stuff like that. I always go to my happy place. I'm always at my happy place whenever it's going bad, and it doesn't fix it, but it helps it a lot. Is that something that you look for? Maybe again, if it's going back to writing maybe a song, or is it if it's going playing FIFA, or if it's with your fiance, going for dinner, or maybe going with your dog?
All those things for sure. I'm like, I don't know, it's so important to have those things which for me like aren't part of the music, that I can just really love about kind of my routine and my life, and things that feel really simple, but going to a local coffee shop and getting a nice coffee, and getting up early in the morning, playing FIFA, man, it's really good for me. But it's really equally really bad for me. I'm like, sometimes I'm sitting there, I'm like, what am I doing, man? I'm here getting my ass kicked by some guy in Germany or something.
Yeah. I'm meant to be writing songs right now, and I'm getting my ass whooped at FIFA.
Literally.
But I saw obviously that interview you did on GBC, and so you have that morning where you have your coffee and you talk to your mum and your dad, and anyone who's sort of free at that time. Is that something for you which also keeps you humble in that sense, where that, again, and I find it tough not to mention it to you a lot. You're away from home a lot, and I struggle with this sometimes, where you're away from home a lot, and all you need is just like a little bit of home. Like
100%. No, I mean, for me, FaceTime, I don't know if I could do this without it. It would be really tough. And then, being from Gibraltar, you just always, I don't know, it's like a next level of like just connection, to the place you're from. And
I feel a little bit different about being from Gibraltar. Some of my friends over here at Loughborough are connected to wherever they live in the UK or something like that. I don't know what it is, and I'm really, that's one thing which I'm most proud of, I suppose.
Yeah, and for me, like, I don't know about you being in Loughborough, for me, I've suddenly realized that I was living everything in this bubble of like constant homesick. And so everything I did was like through this thing of like, I'm really far away from home. And so I've had to try and just like accept that I don't live in Gibraltar. I'm doing really cool things here. I get to FaceTime my family every day. My brother and his wife were literally here. They left 2 days ago. They came for a week. They brought Thai sweet chili sensations, Chips Ahoy, like all the things that I love, just like small things that can make me feel more connected to home. And then, it definitely is a really big part of who I am.
Yeah, I think like you mentioned there, you didn't know how I felt about it. I think from my perspective, I will be brutally honest with you and think that I was probably a bit harsh on Gibraltar when I first left, because been there since obviously the day I was born, and then you up until the day you leave at uni, so 18 and a half probably is we leave for uni, and I felt that I was getting a bit claustrophobic at first.
I understand
and
that.
Then, and then until I went to Cardiff, which is obviously a bigger city, and then when I come back to a place like Loughborough, which is almost like another little Gibraltar, it's small, it's tight-knit, everyone kind of knows everyone, you kind of miss being at your actual home, because where you are, it's actually like home.
Yeah. That's super true.
So I kind of, again, I'm very, very aware that my field, which I'm in now, which is strength and conditioning, is very much dominated over here in the UK. Both my brothers, who hopefully are watching as well, they're living in the UK, both of them, and they realise that. And actually, I'm going to ask them at some point, because I suppose there's being honest with yourself, you can never truly not miss home when we come from a place like Gibraltar. It's again, people who maybe are not from Gibraltar might struggle to understand, but it that's what makes it so sweet when you kind of get a bit of success, doesn't it? Because you know that people back home are always going to be there for you.
Yeah, they're like sharing in it. Yeah. But that was another thing. I don't know about you or, but for me, I suddenly also realized I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to like achieve something for Gibraltar, and then was like, they're like gonna support me either way. And I say they, I mean, you know what I mean? Like people who have seen this side up and gone to our shows, like it's okay, and they don't like. I don't know that they would mind that much if I turned around one day and was like, okay, I'm just going home, like I'm not doing music anymore. But there's maybe this like inherent thing, especially growing up as a musician in Gibraltar. It's always like, oh, but are you gonna actually go and do it? Are you actually gonna make it? And all this, and you're like, well, what is make it? Like, I don't know. I'm doing music for a living right now. Like that's amazing, and it may not last forever. Yeah. So I'm just gonna enjoy it every day.
It's so good, mate. It's so good because, like, again, I mentioned TJ a few times. I'm going to because it's similar elements, just in different fields. Where I literally sat with him in a class, and I heard. Again, I'm not going to mention the teacher because that's very disrespectful. But again, that he literally said, "No one here is really going to achieve much," and I was like. At that time, you're just like, yeah, whatever. Like, and then like TJ's gone on to do it. You're kind of like, you look back on that moment, and then you're just like, mate, if only like I was there and I could check like when you had that moment that TJ had signed for Wickham, and you're just like, mate, if I could see your face when you said that.
Yeah.
I would have paid so much money to see that because
literally.
Again, and again, it comes back to inspiring people, I suppose, doesn't it, as well? Because, again, Gibraltar's not the only small place who probably gets that rep of being Little Gibraltar or another little place.
Yeah.
Do you almost feel, not pressured, but do you have that, feel like you've got that role of inspiring the next generation? Simon's not 57 years old, but do you have that knowledge that you do have that responsibility of inspiring the next generation at some point? Not as you are now. Sorry, that's disrespectful. At some point. You are ready for sure.
I'm not like actively like, oh yeah, I need to inspire people. What's really cool is like when I've gone back to Gibraltar, like I was there over Christmas, and Jeremy Bettis, my friend, was like, come and give a talk to the students at the music academy, like just about songwriting. And I suddenly realized like, oh yeah, like I actually have some cool, valuable tidbits and stories to tell now. And that's really cool. But, and I've told him, and I mean, anyone who's like interested at all, I'm always willing to talk about this weird journey that I'm on and this cool journey that I'm on. But yeah, so I know that maybe some people will be inspired, but I don't like I'm not like Keisha. Yeah, everyone's inspired by me. It's more like, cool, you want to be a musician? Yeah. Well, then if you have any questions for me, and if there's any way I can help you, I will. If not, just keep doing you, because you'll probably get there on your own.
Well, so he's already given it away, ladies and gents. Going to answer my question. What you need to do: play FIFA, write music,
and FaceTime your parents.
FaceTime your parents. But no, like I suppose again, for those people who are looking up to you and wondering, because it's not all glitz and glam. Obviously, when you're on stage and you are performing, obviously, I'm gonna big up in 2023. King Calaway is going on tour, which I heard. So obviously, I'll
big tour.
All links in the description. And you mentioned how performing in these massive baseball stadiums like Boston Red Sox and stuff like that, which again is that glam part, I suppose, for a lot of people. What are some of those times which are tough, both mentally? I've just created a different word there. Mentally and physically, where people don't see, and maybe it gets under wraps a bit. Again, like now footballers will start to open up and things like that, and they start to talk about it. What about for songwriters and musicians, where those tough times, like okay, one for Simon's probably being away from home as well.
Yeah,
I'll let obviously go ahead, mate.
Well, it's interesting because when I'm home, like in Nashville, I think about Gibraltar a lot. I'm homesick a lot of the time, And then when I'm on the road, I think about my Nashville home, and I'm homesick in that regard, you know, and I miss Izzy, my fiance, and I miss those things. But one of the hardest things for me about being in a touring band is the amount of waiting around, because the travel time, like there's been times where we'll get in a van at 9 a.m. and literally drive for 10 hours, and then we're playing the next day for 45 minutes. And so it's like we did a 10-hour drive up, spent the day waiting, played 45 minutes, and then a 10-hour drive back. And so those are the bits where you have a lot of thinking time, which is, for me, is the worst. Like, thinking time is never the best time, but in such big doses. But I'd say that, and then struggling with, sometimes we've played a show, like we played the Late Late Show with James Corden in 2019, and I think 2 days later we played a show in Georgia to like no one, because it just was what it was, and that's the reality of it. Like, you can be top of your game playing a really cool national TV show, Late Late Show, and then the next day you're playing to not that many people. But that's what I've always understood music to be. It's a grind, it's a journey. One day's success doesn't mean it's going to be there the next day. And there's something to learn from every gig. But yeah, those are some of the harder bits for sure.
How do you persevere through those times then? Because
comedy, we just have to laugh about it. This is, I'm going to jump right in. This is where I really value being in a band, because I don't know how I do on my own, but we can joke about it. We can, just have a laugh, because if you take it too seriously, what's life without a bit of comedy? So,
man, I suppose you're like, oh, remember that 10-hour journey in that bus? God, that sucked.
To play to no one. Yeah, exactly. We always joke, like, there's more people on stage than watching right now.
But I suppose there's always going to be times, I suppose, where maybe someone in that group, or maybe, again, if you've maybe traveled by yourself, for example, do you have any, like, maybe specific strategies for yourself? Is it, again, we mentioned FaceTime, but is there specific strategies? Because I know your bio on Instagram says, like, like one day at a time, something like that. Is it, and I'm very much like that, and that's how I kind of get through it. Obviously struggling at the moment, obviously, this is bloody difficult.
I can't even imagine.
So, like, I'm like, just one day at a time. And my family hate it if they're watching. My family absolutely hate it with a passion, because they can never plan anything. But you can, like, I'm about the same. Is that a tactic for you where you can get through those tough times?
Yeah, I mean, especially like specifically with the traveling and the driving, like, I have a Kindle, and I randomly during the COVID year decided that I was going to start reading, and that's been really good for me, because like we'll get in the car and drive for 6 to 10 hours, but I've been like living in the 1940s in Madrid, or I've been like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm in Southern America in some cool legal thriller, and so I can like completely distract myself. Those are ways to get through it. But then also, I mean, I remember making that my Instagram bio on a day when it just felt like everything was, too much was going on, and I found it really hard to get a grip on things. So reminding myself to kind of be where my feet are and just take it one day at a time, I think that's super important.
And then how do you not look, is that a way that you don't look too far ahead in terms of maybe where King Calaway's going, but then as yourself in terms of personal success?
Yeah, because if I were to tell myself from 10 years ago what I'm doing right now, I'd be really excited. But then there's days when I'm doing this and I get disheartened. I feel like I'm failing, or we haven't achieved stuff as a band, and that's why it's like, if you can slow it down a bit and just kind of appreciate everything that's going on around you, then it makes it a lot easier to get through it.
That's awesome. And a point which I've just thought of, like, when you're going, because obviously everyone sees the big bands and they're traveling first class, they're traveling these massive coaches. How important is it to look after yourself, performing on tour or writing an album? Obviously, I see you've got the Apple Watch on there, so things like sleep and stuff.
Yeah, bro.
FIFA definitely hinders sleep, ladies and gents.
No,
how is it important? Because I've seen like obviously stuff, obviously like vocal cords and stuff, and nutrition and stuff like that. Is that a big factor for you, or is it something that naturally is quite easy for you to kind of recover?
Yeah, no, it's super important for me. I've always struggled with losing my voice. I get too excited, sing with the wrong. I mean, technique is everything when you're singing. I'm a lot better at it now, just because I've kind of grown up and I'm more mature in it. But,
he's decent. He's decent. Yeah.
But I mean my vocal techniques. But I think, man, like for me, going to the gym, getting my steps in, like, is so important for first and foremost my mental health. It's like I go to the gym as if I'm taking Panadol when I have a headache. I go to the gym if I'm feeling a bit low, because it just gets me out of that headspace. We've also got the wedding coming up, so we're shedding for the wedding.
That is definitely not conducive to trying to clear your head either. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Simon, which flower? Can you decide which flowers you want? Like, come on, what cake do you want to make? How are your groomsmen gonna prepare? Can you just like make a decision?
It's amazing.
Trying to go to gym.
All the million things, but it's just like a really exciting time in life. You know what I mean? So I don't want to rush through it. We're like, we're engaged. We've got a wedding on the way. There's a tour coming. Yeah, and it's just like, that's why I want to take it one day at a time, because, like we were just saying, like the wedding's like 3 or 4 months away, and then we'll never be a fiance again. Like that's a really cool thing that we are right now. So I don't know, just enjoying it as it comes.
It's funny because my brother, obviously you know, is Matt as well. Is getting married as well. And I went up to their house last week, and Matt just seems the most chilled out. Matt's like me, chilled out. Like we're all three brothers, and Nick as well.
That's so funny.
Pretty chilled out. And then, like, his fiancée, Sherelle, is just like, we've got a meeting with that teacher next week. And Matt's just like, when?
Just super laid back. I love it.
I suppose you can't take yourself too seriously as well, to a certain extent, because, like I said, I suppose, again, it's cliche as well, but this could all, again, be over at some point, no, I suppose?
Yeah, literally. I mean, that's like the first lesson you learn in music is the success is very unlikely that it will be long term. And so enjoy everything as it's happening and keep them as stories to tell, basically. That's how I see it.
Is there any times for you maybe where, again, enjoyment's quite tough? Because obviously, like, again, they mention it in cricket or a lot. There's like, so you've got to enjoy it first, you know, because, like, again, like so many cricketers that I've had on have said, you've got to enjoy it first and then it doesn't perform well. I think that's a bit naive in a certain sense, because you're not going to love it all the time. There's going to be days where you're just not feeling it.
Yeah.
Does that happen for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's normal with anything. No, that too much of a good thing isn't a good thing. So you like, and it's weird because things like sports, things like music, they start off when you're a child because it's a passion and it's your escape. Like for me, playing the guitar and singing and all that was the thing that I did after homework and got to like, or do instead of homework. No, and you were just pushing all that to the side. And now it's like my full-time career. And so the stakes are a bit higher. You have to treat it like a job, because that's what it is at the end of the day. So I think enjoying, like we've talked about, other things, distractions, taking a breath, going outside, grabbing dinner with friends, playing some FIFA. You're gonna keep just doing that, but just things that you're like, just to refresh you. Basically, you want to stay refreshed. Yeah.
That's awesome, mate. That's awesome. I could genuinely go on for about 10 hours. But we're going to go on to a question from the public section. I thought this was quite, again, I mention it every episode because I feel like it's quite unique, because everyone normally likes to sort of save or like keep it a surprise who's coming on next. But I think it's good because I personally, if I was listening to a podcast and I could have asked a specific question that wasn't answered, kind of eat me inside a bit. So I make sure that I release it, create an absolutely amazing story that goes out. Perfect. And it looks great as well at the same time. So, got a couple of questions here for you, mate, and they're both absolute bangers. So, what made you join a band rather than going solo? We kind of spoke about it in a bit of the comedy sense, but what else? What else dragged you? Come on to this band, Simon. Come on now. What made you go in a band instead of solo?
I mean, I didn't I wouldn't say I actively was okay, I have a choice right now, be in a band or be solo.
Yeah.
So I just kind of was going like Father Charlie back in Gibraltar, gave me this advice. He's like, you just walk through doors so long as they're open, and then if they close, they close.
It's opportunity.
It was basically the opportunity presented itself. I'd always been in a band, so I wasn't fazed by the idea of joining a new band. And then now it's more like I have an even greater appreciation for solo artists, because without being able to lean on each other as a band, I feel like I would have struggled a lot. And I see solo artists at festivals, and they're doing all the press, and then they're doing the meet and greets, and that they are the only person who can sort of represent. And we do it, we're always at all those things together, but the fact that we're all together makes it a little easier. And then even just now, everything is so social media driven, we get to share the load a bit on that stuff. So hopefully that helps.
And talk about it when it's not going well. I suppose it's, if you're traveling solo, you might not have your family with you all the time. You've got another family to talk things through with. I'm a massive talker. I probably talk way too much, as you probably have gathered. But when things aren't going well, talking it through for me is literally the most important thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we can come off stage and debrief.
Oh shit!
Literally, we can have a joke with each other. Oh man, you played a couple wrong notes, all in good humor, and just
of course.
And then we can also if there's just genuine concerns, I don't know about the show, guys. I'm feeling a bit nervous, and we can kind of be there for each other, pick each other up. Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. And this was my favourite question that got asked. We had a couple, but I had to narrow it down.
Cool.
Nowhere near as much as obviously Simon has to narrow down his songs. But what gave you? This is obviously we've spoken about this a fair chunk, but I suppose this kind of defines it and helps this person. I know exactly who it is. So what? Because I sent him a message and said, "Oh, brilliant question. Definitely gonna ask him." So what gave you the conviction / confidence to leave the comfortable life in Gibraltar and pursue a life for yourself in the US?
That is a really good question. I don't think it's any one thing. I think it's a combination of belief, both in yourself and in the fact that something good could come of this. The kind of dreams that I've had as a child meant that I was always maybe subconsciously expecting that I wouldn't be based in Gibraltar. But it's not a struggle every day, but a lot of the time I do think about that. There's a very comfortable life that I could live in Gibraltar, where my family is just down the road, and it's just such a beautiful place to live as well. I think it's the dreams and the optimism that something cool could happen that I could never have even dreamed of. And so those are some of the things that kind of pushed me and drove me to leave and be here right now.
Awesome. And obviously we've spoken about a hell of a lot of sort of tactics that you kind of can use being away, even if it's at uni or even someone like Spain or where it's quite close. So definitely reach out again if you ever sort of feeling uncomfortable. And Simon or myself can definitely help. Simon,
for sure.
Me, he's a bit further away. So obviously you might be able to answer that question a bit better, but that was awesome. So on to the closing notes, mate, because again, I can speak here for hours with you, mate. Has there been one or a number of individuals, both in and outside of music, who have inspired or motivated you in your career thus far? And maybe it doesn't have to be either one or the other or both, but because like we said, there's kind of almost two different lives where you're in music and you're outside of music. Because I'm very family and friend orientated.
Yeah, same here.
Again, when I see someone like you making it, or someone like TJ making it, or some of the guests that I've had on previously make it, inspires the living daylights out of me. So what about for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people who have pushed me and encouraged me. Obviously, my parents, my brothers, my family, my sister, everyone who's in that kind of falls under that family umbrella. I feel super supported. I've never, for me, that's really important. Like, I've never been here feeling guilty for being here. On the contrary, they've been so supportive. My music teachers growing up, Chris Cortez in Bayside, Christian Santos. I mean, those are people who have just always, like with Christian, especially for him, it's really cool because I always had a lot of self-doubt, and he was like, for you, it's literally like a matter of time. Like, I don't know why you're like doubting. And so that kind of language I've never sort of given myself. And so having someone who can be so positive and optimistic on my behalf, I think has driven me a lot. I mean, spoke a bit about Father Charlie, Father Paul. I mean, my faith is super, super important to me. It's definitely shaped like who I am. And so, yeah, I mean, the list is endless, really.
Yeah, no, it's awesome because when and what's awesome, I think, to mention there, apart from being all from home specifically, I suppose one of the questions I wanted to kind of intertwine with this one was, how much do you look at like others, and how much do you have to be like, oh, I kind of really need to focus on myself, because if I kind of follow a pattern, because I've heard this in music specifically, where if you kind of follow a pattern of someone, it can get kind of caught out straight away, or like pretty easily.
Yeah, you always want to be authentic, and
authenticity. Yeah, that's obviously where I was kind of trying to get to.
It's like so important. Yeah. I sometimes just put a lot of pressure on myself because I know I'm from one of the coolest places in the world, and I had a very unique upbringing that, you know, you can obviously relate to, but there's like 30,000 of us who can relate to that. And so I always feel like I have this pressure that I've put on myself, where I'm like, I want to be able to tell stories about this, but at the same time, it can get a bit cliche when you're just like doing that. So I think it's important to dig deep in my songwriting and like constantly learning more about who I am and how to put that into music. That for me is like the most important bit.
That's awesome. That's an awesome answer to that question. I was going to ask something else, but I've forgotten. But hopefully it'll come to me by the end of that. So, what is one piece of advice that you would give to anyone who wants to be the next Simon Dumas, playing FIFA for a living? I mean, writing songs for a living, or anyone who wants to succeed in the music business, or anyone who wants to pursue their dream of
I would say
business.
If you're chasing music, chase music. Try not to chase one part of music. So keep your interests open. Learn a bit about the music business. If you're songwriting, try and, in a very simple way, GarageBand or whatever, like try and learn how to record yourself. I think becoming as multi-skilled as possible is going to go a really long way for you, especially if you're younger. And then as you grow up, you'll kind of fall into what you love the most in music. But just, kind of try and keep your options open. I would have never said when I was like 10 years ago, I'm going to be in a country band in Nashville. But I kept my mind open to it. I kind of chased the things that I loved, and then this is just where I've ended up. So, open mind and enjoy it.
Perfect, mate. What a way to finish that. That's awesome. So just crossed over the hour mark, and it's felt like 5 minutes. So
Smashed it.
Always the best episodes. But a massive thanks, ladies and gents, to Simon for coming on. I'm going to leave every single one of those links in the description for King Calaway and Simon as well. And hopefully, fingers crossed, seeing Simon on stage soon again. And obviously, everyone give him the best of luck in the description, in the comments below. And thanks, mate, for coming on, because obviously,
thank you.
It's a very busy.
I'm glad we could make an international Zoom call work. So thanks very much.
Thanks to not paid partnership, but thanks to Riverside, mate. The quality is awesome. So massive big up to them. And very jealous of Simon's studio, by the way. I told him before we started.
It's just a fancy microphone.
One's like, I'll get there one day.
You'll get there one day.
But no, mate, massive thank you, and thank you obviously to everyone for listening in, and we'll obviously catch you in the next episode. Thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching that episode of the Fitzness Podcast. I'm blown away. That was probably one of the best flowing conversations I've probably had on the podcast. I just love the way that it flowed. You know, normally you guys can't see it, but I normally have my iPad in front of me here, and I don't go off the notes like an interview, but I use them quite a bit just to keep the flow of the podcast going. But I didn't. It was flowed so naturally. I hit all of those points just naturally, and I couldn't have wished for a better episode to film. So Simon, if you're watching, thank you so much for your energy, your enthusiasm, and your willingness to actually sort of answer the questions to the minute detail. So thank you so much for that. Obviously, if any musicians are watching, this should be an absolutely unbelievable episode to help you get inspired, to stay inspired, some tips and tricks for you when it comes to your songwriting or composing, whichever you do. So please, if it did help you, please give it a like, a share. Please consider subscribing because it helps us out an absolute hell of a ton, both on YouTube, Spotify, and Anchor. And we will see you guys next Wednesday for another episode of the Fitzness Podcast. Take care, team.